What's going on? So in this video, I'm going to run you through what the gurus won't tell you about managing 40 plus clients at once in an agency model, primarily what we're running. Just to be clear, we generated $10 million online. Here's some Stripe screenshots and WAP screenshots, or I guess we don't really have a WAP, but there's a fan base screenshot here. To be clear, we generated $10 million last year for our clients and our partners. We're spending around $1 million a month in ads right now, 20 million follower portfolio, hundreds of clients helped, hundreds of industries. And to be clear, the goal with this channel is to build a community of cool people, gain some reciprocity with the world, and attract top talent. And all that I ask is that you give me feedback. If you hate the video, dislike it, leave me some hate. And my fucking wolf is just like tripping out over here. But yeah, if you hate the video, we keep it raw here. I don't edit these videos, so go leave some hate in the comments. It would be greatly appreciated. If not, pay the fee. Subscribe or like the video if you enjoyed it, or if you do enjoy it. But yeah, so why 40 clients, right? To be clear, there's two sides of the spectrum, right? There's the you only need one client growth operator mindset, which is horrible, absolute trash mindset to have. If you only need a few clients or you only need one client, because then you gain over-reliance on your clients, right? You don't ever want to be over-reliant on any of your clients, so super, super important that you don't live in this one client mindset, right? Then there's the other mindset of you need to have like hundreds of clients, and this just leads to too much headache, right? A lot of people have these businesses where they're just complete headache businesses. Like, why would anyone want to run this business? It's not fun to run. It's not efficient. It doesn't provide results to the clients. It's not actually a useful business. And so this is where a lot of people end up. They end up in this trap of, hey, you need to get 100 clients. Now, I think that 40 is like kind of like a perfect number, 40, 50. Obviously, I want more than that eventually, to be clear. But right now, we're around 40. I don't know the exact number. I'm not going to make one up. I guess I could look at it, but too lazy to look at it right now. 10% rule is a rule that I made a while back. Basically, all these growth operators that we were mentoring back in the day basically came to me and said, hey, I got one client or I got two clients. Or like, you know, they look at Russell Brunson. He's like, one funnel will change your life. And then they extrapolate that and they're like, oh, one client will change my life. All I need to do is get one client, that one client. And I've definitely had that client that, you know, or those clients that are those top 1% clients. But to be clear, they are very, very rare. So you never really want to have more than like 10% of your revenue coming from one client, right? And mathematically, you need at least 11 clients to make that work. But in reality, you need closer to 40 to actually make it, you know, add up and work, right? So to be clear, this is kind of the real reason why. But the big, you know, I have 7 main lessons that I've compiled here of what I've learned from just like the basic operations that you're going to need to manage 40 plus clients. So this isn't no basic like, oh, have Slack notifications. Like, I'm not on that. I'm telling you like the real high level shit. And so lesson number 1 is we don't do scheduled cadence meetings. Or like anything like that. We don't do cadence meetings. We don't have a meeting with like our chief of staff or anything like that, like on a certain day, or we don't have a specific check-in call on a certain day. And yes, once you get to a certain size, after you get to 100 clients, maybe it makes sense to do this. At the stage of anything less than 40 clients, you don't need to have weekly or daily calls, except for a sales team. This is the only exception, in my opinion, is to have a sales team that has, you know, specific check-in cadence meetings. I would recommend it for the sales team because they always need to be training. They need to be in sync. And yeah, it's okay to have like a group meeting, you know, once a week or something like that. But these cadence meetings just waste so much time, right? And to be clear, Looms, like literally like this video here can replace meetings, right? So if I'm just going to, you know, have a meeting that's going to be basically pointless, that could be summed up in 5 minutes, I'm just going to record a Loom video instead of trying to go out and, you know, have a whole meeting about it. A lot of people waste so much time trying to, you know, do these long-ass meetings when they could just honestly do a Loom or do something that's a lot quicker. And so don't waste your time on cadence meetings, right? You also need to have standards in your company for like response times. And these should be KPIs. These should be certain things. So, you know, you need to have a good, great, and tolerable metric. Just like you would with any other KPI, response time is super, super important as well. So I would recommend that you focus on, you know, how can you get your response time down so you can respond to your clients faster as well as to other team members faster. This is a super, super important thing. You know, you got to have a quick response time, right? And this is also going to, you know, be able to help these clients not churn. And we'll talk a little bit more about churn in a little bit. I like the open calendar method. Ultimately, this is what I always do. I just have an open calendar. If somebody wants to book in on a certain time, I let them book in. And my days, to be clear, I have a few main priorities. I have sleep, I have the gym, I have a deep work session, which is typically 4 hours, right? My gym session is like 1 hour, maybe 1 hour and a half. Sleep, it's typically going to be like 8 hours. Deep work's 4 hours. And then I typically have like another, maybe 8 hour session. I don't know what it would be, of like just regular work. This isn't necessarily deep work. This is work when they can book in. And this is just like regular work, right? And so this is going to be, around 8 hours. And this time is typically going to be comprised of calls. This is where I'm going to take all my calls, as well as all of my just other miscellaneous tasks that aren't my like critical tasks that I'm going to complete in deep work, right? And so this is how to manage yourself inside of this system, which this is super important. Nobody really talks about how to manage themselves when they're talking about client management, because they just think ops is like, how can I go manage everybody else? But in order to properly manage everyone else, you need to be able to manage yourself. That's the most important thing. And so where I like to start is just this. Map out your time, put it in your Google Calendar, and this will kind of plan itself. Because right here I have like around 3 extra hours of just like extra time. Maybe I devote an extra time to sleep. Maybe I have an extra 2 hours of deep work, for example. And you can kind of play around and get these numbers to where they actually match up in a line so that it actually makes up 24 hours. But yeah, that's typically how I like to manage my days. I don't like to have a ton of scheduled cadenced meetings because then, especially in this deep work session, whenever I have this deep work session and whenever you have your deep work sessions, you don't want anyone to be able to book in on your calendar. Your regular work sessions, while some of these sessions may contain deep work, these are going to be sessions where people can actually book in, right? And so this is kind of how I like to structure my day, how I like to structure my lifestyle. Now, lesson number 2 is that most bottlenecks are your own decisions. They're not staff errors. They're not something that someone else caused. You need to take responsibility for these things yourselves, right? And if your team keeps making mistakes, it's likely because of your SOPs or your processes. It's not likely that it's them. Sometimes it's them, but typically when it is them, it's just because you don't have the proper accountability mechanisms. So when you are the leader, when you are the person who's trying to manage all of these clients and all these people, you have to understand that this stuff works 2 ways, right? You have to make sure that you can manage everyone that's internal and external. So you need to have processes for both, right? You need to have processes for how you communicate with people externally and how you communicate with people internally, right? And so whenever someone fucks something up, it's typically because your process for communication was off or your process for whatever was off, right? And so most problems come down to 3 main things, right? Poor documentation, undefined ownership, like just having something that's supposed to be done, but it's not assigned to a specific person. That's a huge one that I see a ton. It's just like people just don't define who's supposed to do a task. And then no quality control before the deliverables reach the client. That's going to really, really play a huge role in churn is quality assurance, right? Lesson number 3 is that onboarding will just like completely make or break the ability to scale. And this is a huge one. A lot of people talk about onboarding. I know this video is talking about like what the gurus don't want you to know. 80% of it's onboarding, right? If you can onboard clients, the biggest thing in onboarding that people miss is they don't collect enough data, right? Especially when you're doing something like, for us, we're working with literally hundreds of different industries. And so it's a lot trickier for us because we have to think of what actually makes the most sense for each industry. And so that's why it's super important to collect data, right? If you're sticking with one niche, you just go and run the same ads every time. You run the same thing every time because you have a proven process. With multiple different industries, you're constantly validating new things, new offers, new ads, new whatever. And so this collection of data is super important on the front end, especially if you're leveraging AI. This is a huge, huge thing. If you're spending any time whatsoever leveraging AI, you need to have good intake data so that you can prompt the AI correctly, right? So whenever we take data, whenever someone onboards as a client, we get this data in our intake form, which is our onboarding form. And most gurus are going to talk to you about like, your onboarding form and then your set of emails. And it's like, that's not all onboarding is, but this data collection part is super, super important, right? And so right now, tactically, we have that in a tally form. We're probably going to actually move it over to a Go High Level form. I'd like for it to be stored in Go High Level as well as in Airtable. But to be clear, right now it's in a tally form because we can break it up. Now, this intake data is also where we do our contracts and everything like that. It's just way smoother to have it all in one spot. But yeah, this intake data is super, super important, right? Now, next thing we have is our moment of wow. So many people just fuck this up. It takes so long to provide any sort of value. Like, we worked with an agency once, and I won't name any names, even though I probably should, because this agency was fucking trash. But to be clear, like, this agency took like 20, 30 days just to get the ads launched. This was back a while ago when we had no clue what we were doing with the ads. We were just like, hey, let's just pay an ads agency, take their systems, and run with them for ourselves, and then we'll be able to do ads. And it ultimately didn't work out with that agency. However, we did gain some valuable lessons. And one huge lesson that we gained was that we need to have a moment of wow, which is what we call it. And this needs to be within 3 days, right? And I think it's Alex Ramosi or somebody talks about this as TTFV, time to first value. But I just like to think of how can we have some sort of moment where they're like, wow, this is really, really good within the first 72 hours. Because this kind of triggers what the relationship's going to look like for the rest of the time that you're working with them, right? So the moment of wow is super, super important within the first 72 hours. Now, also, onboarding call needs to be within 24 hours. This should be self-explanatory. I was listening to a podcast of a dude who runs a pretty large, fairly substantially large company. I think he does around 600 or 700K a month right now. And he basically does the onboarding call after a week or like a week and a half, like 8, 9, 10 days. It's like, that's just completely ruining everything that you just bought, right? So you can't do that. You got to have your onboarding call within 24 hours. I highly, highly, highly would recommend having this onboarding call quick, because this is kind of what sets the stage for how they perceive you for the rest of the relationship. So super important. I think I said this earlier, but most gurus are going to sell you some basic ass shit of like, oh, have a good welcome email, have a good questionnaire, have a good intake form. It's like, that stuff doesn't really matter. The most important parts are not just an intake form, but that you're actually collecting like valuable data points. And like, our intake form is like 50, 60 questions. And that is a long ass form. It takes people a while to fill it out. We always tell people to block off 30 minutes to fill it out. The more valuable this data is, though, the better quality results they're going to get. So you have to explain that to the client. A moment of wow is number 2. And this is super, super important as well. And then the onboarding call being within 24 hours. So this is like the 3 most important things with onboarding. And like I said, this will make or break your scalability, because this will allow you to be able to actually collect different data points and leverage AI, leverage things that are higher leverage, for lack of better words. You know, with better data on the intake, you're going to be able to get a lot better result on the back end, right? Number 4, project management is not ops. A lot of people will try to just say, okay, if you want to be good at operations, have a better project management system, use ClickUp or use one of these things. It's not going to make or break your ops, right? Thing that's going to make or break your ops is not relying on like a checklist. We use team scorecards. So every team member, every person has KPIs, whether they're in sales, whether they are in graphic design, whether they're an editor. They all have specific KPIs. For example, an editor's KPI might be the time to get that final draft back, right? You might have a KPI for how long it takes to get the first draft, how long it takes to get the final draft, and how long it takes like overall from start to finish, you know, for that process. That could be like an editor KPI. A salesperson KPI is pretty self-explanatory. It's just like, what's your close rate? What's your show rate? You know, are you sending selfie videos beforehand? Like, how quickly are we getting in contact with these people as a setter, right? So we always have KPIs. In addition to the KPIs, we track the accountability. Like the percent of times that they're able to do something, we're holding them accountable every single time if they mess it up. So that way they can increase the KPI. And we also need to be reviewing these weekly. We don't need to be doing it on a call. We don't need a scheduled cadence call, but we do need to be reviewing it at some point throughout the week. And so at the end of the week, every week pretty much, I always review our team's KPIs, our accountability metrics, everything like that, right? Number 5, every client needs to follow the same client journey. So to be clear, every client needs to follow some sort of path. Growth operators, this is why most growth operators suck, can't deliver anything. In most agencies, they're the same way now. A lot of them, especially when they're first starting out, they don't actually have an offer. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you to go read Alex Ramosi's book, because that advice is commoditized at this point. It's not valuable. It's no longer valuable. But ultimately you need to have some sort of productized thing that you can sell, right? You can't just sell, I'll help you scale your business anymore. It's just not an offer that the market's willing to take, quite frankly. So to be clear, you need to have a very, very specific productized offer of like, okay, you need, you're going to get X, Y, and Z, and these need to be checkbox items, right? Everything needs to be able to be fulfilled in the contract. There should be nothing that's left up to chance that it might not get fulfilled. And what I mean by that more or less is like, if you have an item that's like video editing, it's not clear as to like what's actually being done, right? We want to have our deliverables in our contracts. So we want to say 30 short form videos edited in XYZ style. And that could be a much more specific quote unquote checkbox item, as I like to refer to them as, right? And another thing is if you're selling something the market doesn't want, you're not going to be able to get 40 clients. It's just very, very unlikely. You can do it, but it's very highly unlikely. Personalization. A lot of people ask me, okay, how do you personalize when every client's on the same journey, right? Especially like operators, they're worried about like, oh, every client, every coach has quite the different service that they need, right? And it's like personalization needs to come in when something breaks. Whenever a system just gets cooked or whenever a system breaks, that's when you personalize. So you go back in and you say, okay, what failed? How can we personalize to make this piece of the system more efficient and more valuable to the client? And that's when the personalization comes in. It's not just personalizing for the sake of personalizing. And yeah, there is a time and place for that, but it's not always. And ultimately, it's just going to complicate the process a lot more if you have multiple industries. So if you're a brand new beginner, try to stick to an niche. Like I said, I've worked with like hundreds of industries, 100 different industries. So realistically, it's like, it is complicated, but once you do it enough, you kind of figure it out. But if you're first starting out, I would try to niche down to something a little bit more specific, make your client journey a lot easier to build out. Now, churn is an ops problem. It's not a sales problem. A lot of people will experience a lot of churn. I've seen this happen time and time again. People will experience churn and they'll instantly go to the salespeople and say, oh, you're overselling, or oh, you're doing this, or oh, you're doing that. It's not the salesperson's problem when you have churn. It is purely an ops problem every time. Not every time, actually. I digress. I take that back. It's not every time, but majority of the time it is, right? So a lot of gurus, a lot of people will blame churn on, okay, it's bad leads, it's the wrong fit. It's really just like you delivered a shit service. You left a client in the dark. Your deliverables missed all the expectations. Your follow-up cadence dies after onboarding. You're not checking in. And ultimately, like follow-up cadence, the salesperson should still be following up after a client closes. There's all those basic tasks. But churn, you got to understand that most of the time it's an ops problem, like majority of the time. And so many people like to blame this on like the salespeople. And like, don't get me wrong, I'm not, an expert in sales by any means. I know of people who have had this issue before where the salesperson does oversell, and that's not good. However, 95% of the time it's an ops problem. Number 7, people focus way too much on the tech stack when it comes to scaling to a lot of clients. The tech stack does not matter. The first thing that matters before you focus on your tech stack, don't go out and buy every software. I've done this before. Our software stack is insane. Like the pricing on our software stack is insane, right? But the tech stack really does not matter at all if your handoff logic is just ass, right? So you need to build out in your client journey specific handoff logic from like one person to the next internally inside of your team, right? So this is something I can't stress this enough. I see this like so many times where people just aren't correlated. Literally probably almost every agency that I've worked with that hasn't turned out well has had this problem where their team members just don't know like what's going on at any point in time, especially when you're firing and hiring. If you're in an agency that's a high churn game, you should really be looking for A players more than anything. I know you probably heard this a million times, and this is something most gurus will tell you, but your handoffs are the most important thing, right? If you're handing off, whether it's because somebody got fired, if it's you're handing off a project to someone else, or it's just like generally you're moving from onboarding to the next step, if these things aren't crystal clear and you don't have notes on people as well, I'll give you a perfect example. I took my husky to a dog trainer, And they keep notes throughout in their Go High Level. I know they use Go High Level CRM, right? And they keep notes in their GHL on every single client so that they can basically track, okay, how did this dog do? How did this dog behave? It helps so much for the client experience because I go in and they're like, okay, I already know exactly what Kyra's problems are. I know exactly what we need to work on. And like that comes with a premium, right? A premium agency is going to have that touch, right? I paid a lot of money for this training agency in comparison to most trainers. This is like the original one that I was looking at was literally 5 times what the original one was. Like the original person I was looking at taking her to training with, this agency was literally 5 times as much, or this training agency, right? And so, you know, it was a choice where I made it because it was premium. And the premium results that came off of that was, okay, now we have like super clean handoffs from client or from team member to team member, right? And this is kind of like the ultimate questions you need to ask yourself to figure out handoffs. It's just like a framework that I've kind of developed over the years. It's just like, who does what, by when, with what context, and what happens next, right? And this is exactly how you build an ops like formula. If you're trying to build out ops for any company, this is exactly how you do it right here. Who does what, by when, and what with what context, and what happens next? That's the question you got to ask yourself. And now, if you stayed this far in the video, I got a bonus tip for you. And this bonus tip is that literally everybody wants, well, not everyone wants solid clients, but most people want a good bit of clients. But nobody wants the infrastructure required to keep them happy, right? And so don't go out and just get clients just because you feel like getting clients. Go out and get clients strategically, but also don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? This is kind of what I would say. Like, scalability-wise, you know, at 40 clients, it's fairly decent. I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or anything, but like most people get like 5 clients. It's just so trash. Like, you're constantly waiting for your next dollar. You don't know where the next, you know, your next meal is coming from, basically. And you don't want to be fighting in that cycle, right? But if you got some value, leave some love in the comments. If you didn't, leave some hate. And that's pretty much it. Also leave a link to, I'll just throw it up on the screen because you like that. Text me. This is my personal cell. Send me a text, send me a WhatsApp message, send me whatever you want. It's literally my personal cell. It will bring to my personal number. And yeah, shoot me a text. Look forward to talking to you soon. Peace.